Welcome to the Battlefield Show. I'm your host, Sage Goodwin, and as always, I'm joined by Sammy Boy. But Sammy Boy is currently running into some Australia network problems. So today we're doing something a little bit differently. We're going to do this 1990 style. So I'm going to go over what's in the actual update that's coming up, offer some of my feedback, and then we're going to go to Sammy to go over some of his thoughts when it comes to the new update that's coming out, 5.2.0. So, Sammy, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. I do apologize to not only you, but also our lovely viewers and listeners for the lack of episode last week, and then this week we're having to do it, like Sage said, 1990s style, pretty much editing both of our recordings together because I'm having some very frustrating internet issues. The internet's been down for pretty much 2 weeks now at this point, which is very frustrating for me, but it's also getting in the way of our favorite time of the week with the Battlefield show. So doing well, but very keen to get stuck into today's episode.
Wi-Fi problems. Thought you got away from it, but sadly you did not. Now let's jump right in. So, Update 5.2.0 is marking the end of this season, and we're going into some very interesting territory. We haven't really had this experience when it comes to a Battlefield game, and I'm very interested to see what direction they take it. First off, though, we are going to get the map rework Hourglass. And this is probably the worst map in the entire game, and we're finally getting some changes. Now, it doesn't seem like they're super, let me just say, how do I want to say this? It doesn't seem like they're very confident in the ways that they're changing it, because they literally, like previous updates, they had actual like, okay, this is what it looked like before, here's what it looks like now. This is what it looked like before, this is what it looks like now. This time, though, they don't have any of that. They just have one single screenshot that looks very similar to the other one that we had for the actual announcement of Hourglass. But this is what they've said they've changed. They've reduced the overall size of Hourglass to keep the combat focused, as well as having more opportunities to defend yourself through added cover alongside the primary routes. You'll also notice remnants of combat that has taken place over time and throughout the map, alongside increased military presence and new fortified positions. So they've changed the village. The Once Quiet Village area is A1. At A1 is now a fortified military base and the new starting location for breakthrough matches. Al-Wada Arches at Flag B1 have received complete overhauls in this now war-torn zone. The bridge has collapsed, creating a crater in this combat-intense area, and a new underground section has been added to keep you secure as you prepare for the assault. You can also take combat to the new underground section below Al-Wada Arches to find momentary relief, and you'll also find the updated rush layout will now take the combat to these new and updated underground areas, which I think that's a pretty good decision there. They've adjusted the bridge as you make your way from the arches toward the downtown area. You'll notice the once pristine skyscrapers are engulfed in flames. The underpass has also been claimed by heavy combat and is littered with destroyed vehicles. Expect heavy resistance from the enemy as you face them in close quarters combat. They've also adjusted the security checkpoint. Fight your way downtown across the main road with new fortified military positions. They've updated the area to make it ripe for vehicle play. The areas leading further into the downtown area have also received new areas of cover, which will help you during the assault. And then the downtown areas are now a little bit different, they say. You'll find intense combat with plenty of new opportunities for the enemy to take advantage from new positions of cover. I'm not impressed with this change. This is going to be the main focus of the podcast. We'll get into some of the other changes first, but first off, I don't think they're taking this as seriously as I think they should have. When you look at something like the previous map updates, they've done a pretty okay job. Most of them, though, they feel basically the same. I'd say the exception to that would be the Antarctica map. Like I feel like Breakaway was the biggest, most drastically improved map, going from this massive, biggest map in Battlefield to now this like okay, yeah, this is the experience that we really want the game to have. They went from huge map to wow, this is awesome. This map is now fantastic. And then Hourglass, they went from okay, this is the worst map of any Battlefield game to it seems like a slightly improved version. Again, they don't seem very confident in it that they want to share screenshots at all. So I don't necessarily know how excited I'm going to be with this change. I still feel like I'm going to skip this whenever I have the opportunity. What do you think, Sammy?
Yeah, I think I feel very similar to you in that it's just not as, I guess, exciting as the previous ones. I think a lot of the previous maps, don't get me wrong, I think like Kaleidoscope and some of the earlier ones, Renewal, those maps, they're not, I don't know, the changes weren't that good. And this kind of feels like it's going back to that, whereas there was a few in the middle with like Orbital and then Breakaway that were really genuinely good changes. And this just doesn't feel like that. It feels as though this is one of those, I guess, smaller ones, which is kind of not what it needs, because at least with Kaleidoscope, yeah, it's still not the best map, but it's a much smaller map. There wasn't as much that they needed to do with that. With Hourglass, it is like currently now, I would say it'd have to be the biggest map in the game since they made Breakaway smaller. So it's the biggest map in the game. They need to do a lot of work to sort of get it back to, I guess, being in line with the previous, all of the previous map rework. So I kind of agree with you that it doesn't sound that interesting. I was really excited to see how this one went. And don't get me wrong, some of they've sort of shared on Twitter some of the, like, I guess they're GIFs, just like quick little sections that we can find in the new version of the map. They look okay. The little underground section looks pretty fun, and if it's big enough, maybe that'll be good. That that can be a section I just always go to, and if it's solid enough, then maybe I'll like the map. I'm not really sure, but it just doesn't grab me like the other ones. When I saw all the stuff at Breakaway, that was like, wow, this looks amazing, and it actually is. It's not. I wouldn't say the map is amazing necessarily, but the comparison of the vanilla version of that map compared to the current version, it is like ridiculously different. And so even though it's probably still like a 7 out of 10 for me, I still kind of like appreciate it when I play on that map. I actually kind of enjoy playing on it just because it is so different than what we originally had. And I just kind of fear that this one isn't going to be the same. The fact that they haven't done anything to the stadium is, I don't know how many times we've said on the podcast, like that is the best part of the map. And I guess they must be bringing it slightly closer if they've said they're bringing the entire map, to be closer. But they haven't actually mentioned it in the patch notes. And kind of like what you said, there's a lot of stuff they just seem like they're not really talking about it. They haven't showed that many screenshots. All of the detailed sections they've talked about, they're not going into that much detail. It's actually just kind of a very bland statement about what that area is going to be. And it just doesn't really fill me with excitement or like hope that it's going to be really good, because with Breakaway, they kind of did gas that up themselves and then it lived up to it. And this one, they don't seem to be really gassing it up. So overall, I'm keen to play it, and I'm sure it'll definitely be better than the current version, that is not hard to do. But yeah, it's definitely not as exciting as Breakaway for me.
I also, again, they're using the storage containers. I like the idea that they are taking the existing locations and making them feel more war-torn. I think that's a good decision. I think that's something that they've tried to do with every single map update that they've done. I'll just be interested to see how it affects things. I do think the underground section sounds really cool. Again, we don't know what that looks like because they didn't give us any screenshots or any comparisons. But it should be coming here soon in terms of like how we're going to play and what it's going to look like and what it's going to change with the game. I feel like this covers most of the thoughts I have for this map of like, I'll wait and see, but it doesn't really strike me as the greatest experience or greatest change or the most impactful change we've seen in the game. I feel like we've gotten a good experience and a good level of expectation. Like when we feel like something's not going to be great, it usually ends up not being that great. We've got a good track record so far with the almost 2 years that we've been involved with Battlefield 2042. When we're like, oh yeah, I don't see this being super impactful. Usually we're right. So we'll see how it goes actually playing the game, but that's my experience or expectations of it so far.
Yeah, I pretty much echo your thoughts there in that, like, I think us and I'm not talking about literally just you and me, I'm talking about the entire Battlefield community, we tend to get those things right, I think, most of the time when, like you said, if something doesn't look that interesting to us and we all start going, it doesn't look that good. Generally speaking, not all the time, but generally speaking, that is how it pans out, and kind of the opposite. When something looks really good, I think we all kind of know that it's generally going to turn out good, maybe with the exception being the launch trailers for this game. But no, since the game's launched, I think whenever something actually looks really good, we all tend to actually acknowledge that, and then it generally does turn out to be fairly decent. So I think we are generally fairly spot on with that, and I feel like it's going to be the same case with this one. And yeah, like you said, I don't really have much else to add to what we've already said. That I'm sure it'll be better than the current version, but it's also not that enticing.
Moving on, though, we have some very fascinating changes. This is pretty new. So we missed last week's episode because obviously the network issues that are still going on. But we're like, okay, yeah, let's figure something out so we can get an episode out and really talk about what's going on. Basically, from the last time we talked about the squad system, they were very gung-ho of like, this is how it's going to work. We don't care what your thoughts are. This is the experience we want. They've changed, and they now will allow you to give squad orders as well as lock and remove functionality. So before, you'd set up a squad and then anyone could join and anyone could leave. You couldn't block people. You couldn't do anything. Now you can lock your actual squad so other people can come in and have the experience that you kind of expect to have in a Battlefield game, like hang out with your buddies that you want to play with, not some random person. That's like the main idea of making your own squad and using that system. So that's finally changed. And now, hey, you'll actually be able to kick people. Wow, why would you want that ability? Who knows? Yes, we want that ability because just as EA can remove people and DICE can remove people, you want to be able to remove people from your squad so your buddy that is on voice chat can join. It's something that you expect to see in basically every online shooter that this game just did not have until now. And they finally changed it, and it's going to be coming in this update. Hallelujah. What are your thoughts on this, Sammy?
Yeah, I think just like probably most of the community, and I'm sure you are in that boat as well, I'm very happy with these changes that they've seemed to make on the fly. It seems as though that was because of the backlash they got from... Essentially, it was like leaked almost in their own trailer that they released, where it had, I think it was either kick or it wasn't a block function. It must have been the kick function that was spotted in the trailer, but then they said it wouldn't be available, and they got absolutely roasted for that, and it led to all that drama with like Ghost Gaming and stuff. Like, it was a pretty big thing, and I think from that backlash, they have probably gone, okay, that's obviously a pretty core function to any squad system, so we need to add that in. And so I'm very glad they are putting that in there. It's probably taken a bit longer than we all thought. They kind of announced this in Season 4, that we'd be getting the squad system or squad management system, and then we haven't really heard anything about it. So it probably took a bit longer, but also if they're going to take longer but get it, make it better, I'm perfectly happy with that. Because, yeah, that's how a squad management system should be. You should be able to invite your friends to it, and let's just say, you're going to play with 4 of your mates, but one of the guys isn't jumping on until 5 more minutes from now. I should be able to lock the squad so that there's the 3 of us in there, and then, in 5 minutes when the 4th mate joins, we can unlock the squad and he can get in there and we can all play together. That's how it should be. It's how it always was in the previous ones. And so, yeah, it's a pretty basic change, and it's it's really hard to praise them for stuff like this, even though they do, because initially they weren't going to do it. Now they listen to our feedback and they are. So they deserve some level of praise for that. But also it's like, it's so hard to praise them because it's like, why? This is nearly 2 years after launch. Like this, this should not be taking this long, and it shouldn't take us pretty much flaming them to do these changes. This should not be something that happens in a game as big as Battlefield. It'd be different if this was some, like, let's just look at like BattleBit, for example. That's a new game made by a small team. If they forget something like that, that's kind of fair enough, even though that you'd still expect it in a game like that. But that's like understandable. A new dev team that's making their very first game, they're going to forget stuff, but this is Battlefield. This has been around for 20 plus years. It shouldn't be taking this long. So it's really hard for me to try and praise them because I do want to. They've listened to our feedback and done what we asked, but yeah, it almost feels a bit like dirty saying like, oh, well done, DICE. You've really done well here, because they haven't done really well. They've just done essentially the bare minimum 2 years after. So I don't want to sound too negative about it. It's a good change, and it's good that it's finally here, and that's really all I have to say. I'm not one to really, like, I don't know, get caught up in something that should have been here for years. If it's not, and then it finally is, it's still a good change, but I think I just can't praise them for it. It's more just like, okay, well done, and now please get to the next things done that you're working on, because this shouldn't be something we're talking about in, it's nearly August of 2023. That should not be the case. So yeah, it's a weird one for me, but like I said, at the end of the day, I don't really like hold grudges like that in terms of stuff not being there in the past. It's going to be here now, and so that's definitely a good change nonetheless.
I'd say the last big thing, obviously the big thing about this update is the new map rework, and I'm excited to see what that looks like. Again, we talked about how maybe it's not the biggest change, but the other big thing that they're adding to this is the vault weapon attachments. So SMGs and LMGs with SMGs and LMGs as the final vault weapons to receive all-out warfare attachments, the rollout is now complete across all weapon categories. And the P90 AKS-74U, the PP2000, M60E4, XM8 LMG M240B, Type 88 LMG, and the RPK-74M. They've all had their damage curves, dispersion, recoil behavior, and accuracy tweaked to feel more consistent with all-out warfare counterparts as viable and competitive options. And this is something I really am glad that they're doing with these vault weapons. I think it took them way too long to actually get them implemented, but they do have to adjust them for all-out warfare and to actually make them competitive. So while new weapons obviously in the real world would be more effective than something from like the 1800s, while that's great in real life and really accurate, it's not very fun to play. So having those be more competitive and have those attachments and have these experiences be brought into a much more viable experience, I think is great. And I think it's something that I'm very happy that they're doing. Because otherwise, yeah, you can use the old weapon, but why would you? And that defeats the whole purpose of adding them to the game. If you can't use them in the game, why add them? So I'm glad that they're doing this. They've also said, in addition, Vault sidearms have also received all-out warfare attachments where possible, so that's also really good. And since this is a large rebalance injection into the game, they will be monitoring the feedback and data post-update, and they're ready to make further changes. There's a ton of other changes that they've made, so a bunch of quality of life improvements. We'll have the link to the actual patch notes in the description of this episode, so make sure you check that out. Stuff like Battlefield Portal has gotten some improvements, some bugs fixed. The different modes have some fixes. The specialists and gadgets have some fixes, and just general like stuff you'd expect to see in every update. So continuing to improve the game. Sammy, though, like, what are your overall thoughts on this? I know we've had some discussions in the past around like the viability of this game going forward and how without a specialist, how is that going to really work, and with how we're not going to get any more reworks, how's that going to look for future seasons? But overall, what do you think about this update?
I think the update seems pretty decent for a 5.2.0. It's not going to be the main one of the season, obviously. So I think it's a decent sized update. And it should, although like I just said, the squad management stuff, it's kind of annoying we're just getting that. I think by the end of this update, the game will be finally, it's almost like it's going to be in the form it should have been in at launch, in the sense of we're going to have that squad management system. All of the map reworks are done. The portal weapons are all going to have their attachments. So it's kind of like a very, almost feels like a tying up loose ends type of update. And I think that's a good thing. I think the game needs that to kind of not have all of these like missing links in terms of, we only had 6 of the 7 maps finished, and we only had X amount of portal weapons that had attachments and all that kind of thing. So I think in that sense, it should be a decent update. And like I said, because it's not the focal point of the season, I think it's pretty decent. If this was obviously like 5.0, it would be a pretty underwhelming update, I think. But for 5.2, it seems pretty fine. I think in terms of what you mentioned about moving forward, like that's where I'm a little bit concerned, because now they have tied up loose ends. What else is there to do? Like, I don't know if they can put out the amount of content that we want. And at least, even though these little, the tying up of loose ends, like the reworks and the portal weapons getting attachments and stuff like that, even though they're not content, at least it's something in each update. But now what are we going to get? What are we, season 6, we're not going to get a specialist. We're not going to get a rework of a map. So are we just going to get one new map, if we even get that? And then 2 new weapons, and that's it for the season? Because what comes in 5.1 or 6.1 and 6.2? I have no idea. I guess we can still get a few more portal weapons. There are still some that haven't made their way across. But yeah, I'm definitely a little bit concerned about that, unless they have in the background really tried to ramp up their content output. And maybe we, I'm saying this sounding very naive, I don't think this will happen, but like maybe we get 2 maps a season, or maybe we get 4 weapons per season, or whatever. So we're just going to have to wait and see, I guess. But it definitely has me a little bit concerned that the game really does now feel like it's coming towards the end, when I don't think most people who play the game, I don't think we want it to, even though it's not the game we hoped for when the trailers were coming out and stuff. Even though I'm, kind of keen for this era to be kind of over, and we, a year or 2 from now, we get a new Battlefield and hopefully it's better. That doesn't mean I want this one to end. I want more seasons. I want seasons 7 and 8, and I just don't know if we'll get them. So yeah, it's definitely a little bit concerning on that front. I'm really not too sure what to expect. I feel like with every other season that we got, we knew what to expect. And season 5 kind of showed that now we don't really know what to expect, because it didn't live up to the other seasons, in my opinion. Even though Reclaimed is a really good map, it doesn't. I think the lack of a specialist and a lack of a lot of the other stuff that we were getting in the previous seasons, this season just hasn't lived up to it. So I'm kind of now concerned about what we get. And like I said, that consistency from season 1 through 4, when season 1 was really solid and we kind of knew what we were getting, when season 2 was launching, I wasn't worried. I wasn't like, oh, is this going to be enough? I kind of just knew everything we were going to get, and I just hoped that the content was good. That's the only worry, which is always a worry. If you're getting new content, you don't necessarily know it's going to be good. But now it's like, not only do I not know if the content's going to be good, I don't even know what content we are getting. And that's definitely somewhere I'm a little bit concerned. So yeah, it's a hard one to put a finger on. I think season 6 will be very telling. I personally think it will potentially be the final season. It just feels that way to me, but also like I don't know, I thought that about season 4. I remember we had that conversation that it just felt like the game was sort of coming to an end, and then they announced season 5, and then they announced season 6. So yeah, who knows? We're just going to have to wait and see, but I will definitely say that I'm slightly concerned about the future of the game until they kind of show that they are committed to it, which I'm not really sure they will, to be honest.
I think overall, like, this is an interesting update. I think this is the beginning of something different, and I like that, but I don't necessarily know, like, what direction they're going to be going, which is almost a little exciting, too, at the same time. But with that, hey, check out our YouTube channels, Sammy Boy Star Wars, Battlefield Show, as well as Star Wars Uplink, if you're down for that. Hey, we'd like to thank Ethan Clark for the beautiful thumbnail, all of you for listening, and we'll see you on the battlefield.